is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. The only thing basic about him is his red box, Stu Horvath.
I don't know. Is that true? I don't know. I know that the kids say things are basic, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah, you're not basic.
Okay.
I'm confident that you are not basic.
Is that like what we used to call normies?
I think that's what we used to call normies.
Okay.
I don't know. I think there's a whole lot of like Uggs and pumpkin spice latte that we don't drink or wear, so we're good.
All right. Hey, I'm into it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm into coffee just as much as the next guy and warm boots, but there's certain bridges that are a little too far. So today we're going to talk about the D&D Red Box, which is the starting point for many a D&D player of our generation.
This is true.
We're also going to talk about some fun things that Stu got in the mail this week.
I love a good mail day.
But first, we're going to talk about a game called Mixtape Massacre that I recently bought off the internet, which I am completely in love with.
Oh, yeah, we had fun with it.
We had a lot of fun with it. Now, this is a game from Brightlight, and it is a game about being a slasher from a slasher movie in the 80s or 90s. Each person playing the game gets to play a different slasher, and these are all riffs on some of your favorite horror icons like Michael Myers, like Leatherface, Chucky, Carrie. Everybody's represented. However, they're obviously not called by the proper name.
Yeah, I played a Hannibal Lecter-like.
I felt like that was really on brand for you.
Oh, hey, he's a stylish, classy guy.
And here we are. So this game is one that's haunted me for a little bit because I saw it last year and it popped up on the internet and I really, really fell in love with the art. And I was like, all right, I got to get this game. And I went to go look for it on Amazon, the usual spots, and it wasn't there. It's because they actually put it out themselves. They even pack it and ship it to you themselves.
Aww.
So this is a really cool mom and pop organization.
It's like a family experience.
Yeah, except this family makes games about horror killers. And it's great.
The family that slashes together stays together?
I think it's the family that slays together.
Slays together. Yeah, there you go. I'm not good with rhymes.
Yeah.
Not a poet at heart.
I haven't been thinking about that all week waiting for this episode. So this game is pretty awesome. So I ordered it directly from them, and I have to go and give them a shout out because when I open this box, they tell you who it was packaged by, they give you stickers, and they actually give you instructions on how to put the player card together, which I think is pretty cool. They take every little step to make this a really personalized experience.
Which you wouldn't think that the player card being put together would be a hard thing, but it is actually a little bit of like a head scratcher when you get it out of the box. You're like, oh, I don't want to break this.
Yeah, it is a little bit delicate. That said, it's a knife. It's a bloody knife.
Yeah.
And it has little holes that you pop pegs into so you know what your life counter is. Yeah. And it has a slot for you to put your character card in so you always know who your character is and what your character is all about. I think it's genius. I think it looks great.
Because, you have a little bit of information that you don't want the other players to have, your special ability.
Yeah, exactly. So you were in a town called Tall Oaks. And in this fictional town, there's all the obvious haunts. There's the arcade, there's the high school, there's the hospital, there's the cemetery, of course.
There's the lake.
There's the lake. And each killer starts at a different spot, and you have to kill your way through the town. Now, the object of this game is pretty cool. You actually have to get 10 souvenirs. And the souvenirs are all body parts, like eyeballs and feet and hands and whatever. And when you complete a Killer Scenes Dude card, you actually get one or maybe multiple trophies. Now, what I loved about the game is it is a traditional board game. Now, there is a game board. The game board looks incredible. There's also dice. Now, the dice are pretty cool. The dice is how you solve or complete a killer scene, and you have knives, fists, and pentagrams. Anytime you roll 3 of a kind, something special happens, but these are how you complete the scenes, which I think is pretty cool. There's also a dice for movement, which is your standard 6-sided dice, red, of course. For blood.
Yeah. And don't forget the scenes. The scenes are little parodies of iconic 80s movies, not necessarily horror movies. I remember we killed Lloyd Dobler.
We got to kill Lloyd Dobler.
From Say Anything, which, made me feel good because that movie's terrible.
We got to kill Bill and Ted as well.
Yeah, I don't feel so good about that
I
one.
really feel kind of horrible about that myself.
Yeah, Lloyd Dobler, though.
He had it coming.
Yeah.
Anyway, this game is great. The game is fast and it's easy to play. Movement is cool too. You move around the board. When you complete a killer scene, if you make a kill, you go on what they call a killing spree. So all your movement gets doubled and you just keep killing until you lose one of the combats.
Indeed.
Which is awesome. And speaking of combat, there is a great mechanic in the game where you can actually fight one of the other monsters in the traditional Freddy versus Jason, let them fight style, which is a way that I got killed from the game because
That's true.
I definitely did not have the dice rolling in my favor that night and I died bad.
Yeah, my wife killed you, right?
Your wife did kill me. She's a bringer.
She is. She's a terrible person to play games with because she's very good at them and pretends like she isn't.
She's exceptional at them.
Ugh.
And she's a terrible liar.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to play. I don't know. And the next thing you know, she's running the table.
Ugh, it's terrible.
That's why you married her.
No, it's not. I thought she was a pushover at games.
And now you'll never win.
And now I never win.
So this game is pretty cool. I got it for $50 from their website directly. And right now, when this episode drops, there is 5 days left on the Kickstarter for their second game, Escape from Tall Oaks, where they turn it on its ear. And now you're playing the victims trying to survive the night with the killers stalking you, which I think is pretty cool.
Oh, nice.
What's even better than that is they also built it so you can connect the two boards together and make a super town out of it, which is kind of like when we played Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters with the expansion. You could attach the one board to the other, make like a big super game.
Yeah, or Arkham Horror, where you have more boards than you have table.
You're not going to need as much table for this game, folks. What is also cool about it is there are expansions. Black Mask is currently sold out. During the Kickstarter, they offered another expansion.
Oh, jeez.
To upgrade your kickstarting thing. And by the way, I have to give them credit. They put out enough of those Instagram ads. That's how it finally got me.
I was going to say, they sort of stalked you.
Oh, they stalked me like a serial killer.
Hey, it's on theme.
It's so on brand for them. That's how they got me. They totally, I kept seeing the ads pop, and I'm like, oh, fine, I'm going to buy this game. I've been thinking about it for a while. I'm going to buy this game. So I got the game, and then the Kickstarter's coming out. And then during the Kickstarter, they have another expansion called Lockdown, where it incorporates the sheriff. Where, he's either an agent of chaos or you could play the sheriff. It's a great world that they've built, and I'm very excited about my next game that I'm going to be getting once the Kickstarter completes. There is 6 days left for it, folks. Definitely check out Mixtape Massacre, Escape from Tall Oaks on Kickstarter, and go to their website right now. Go to Brightlight and buy the original Mixtape Massacre. You definitely won't regret it.
I just had a thought.
What's that?
What if they're like the family from Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Oh, no.
Maybe they're a creepy family.
Oh, God, I hope not.
I mean, we just made a big deal about, hey, the family that slays together stays together, but...
Because they definitely have my address. Oh, no, Stu.
All right, well, we'll lock the doors.
My God. Oh, now I feel horrible about everything.
I have that effect on people.
Jesus. All right, well, let's move on to the next topic. The next thing that we have is the meat of the podcast, which now I feel even worse calling it the meat of the podcast because I might be the meat if this family stalks me and kills me.
Indeed.
We're going to talk about the red box.
Maybe that's what the little tag was. They were like telling you like which member of the family that was going to come for you.
God, all of this is terrible. The game is great, folks, but this... Stu, start talking about the red box.
I'm just mean.
No, I'm concerned.
So the D&D Red Box basic set, 1983. It's the classic, right? It's red. It's got that Larry Elmore painting of the fighter going up against the dragon.
So good. It's like one of the most iconic D&D paintings of all time.
Yeah, they slapped that thing on everything.
I have a t-shirt with it.
That stupid wallet has it on it.
I know.
Art and Arcana has it on the cover. If you actually stop and look at that picture, it's weird. Like that guy's legs, his hips, like one of his legs looks like it's dislocated.
It's not as bad as a live field. Keep moving.
Well, yeah. And the dragon only has one horn, which I always thought was kind of odd because I'm always looking for the second horn. Anyway,
right.
It's cool though. It's super cool. So 1983, this comes out, and it's basically like this weird kind of pivot point for a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. It's like the bridge between like the old school and the newer versions of D&D that were coming out in the mid 80s. It was the bridge between, your veteran players and your new players. And it got a whole bunch of people into the hobby. And it's also the bridge between the multiple basic sets that preceded it and this new basic system that TSR has going forward. So where do we start? I guess we have to go with the first book, which is the player's book. So we were talking last podcast about the Call of Cthulhu starter set, and this functions in the same sort of way. It's built specifically for new players. The first thing that you get in the player's book is a short solo adventure, which is, like a choose your own adventure, which is also illustrated by Larry Elmore. It introduces this female cleric that I think that every young boy that had this box set sort of has a huge crush on.
Aw.
And she dies.
Stu? Oh, I guess you don't have to say spoilers because it's like it's almost 40 years old at this point.
Yeah, I was 6. So
God, so every kid who had a crush on her, she dies. I'm having like flashbacks to Bridge to Terabithia, and they're not good. Fudge.
And she gets killed by a magic missile.
Oh.
It's cold.
That's mean.
Yeah.
Not even a fireball.
Yeah. But that goes to our point last time about having a short scenario that you could just play yourself and you get the core concepts and you don't need a DM. You don't need a bunch of friends to play it. You can just sit down with the box and play it. And then after that, you get all of your basic player book stuff. You get your basic classes and your races, which double as classes. Like Elf is a class and a race.
Okay.
And we played this, so you're kind of familiar with that. And it's only dungeons.
Okay, that's cool.
If there's Sky, that's for the expert set, which is a weird delineation. But, hey, whatever works. And this is the start of what people call BECMI. Basic, Expert, Rules Companion, the C, Master Rules, and the Immortal Rules. And it's 5 box sets that Frank Menser did over the course of 83 to 84. It takes you from level 1 to, I think, level 36 through the Master set.
Jinkies.
Yeah, it's way high. It's a totally different system than D&D. So, but I'll get to that. And then the Immortal Rules is for characters who've transcended level.
Like, what do you fight at that point? Godzilla, the Tarrasque?
No, you're even beyond that. I think one of the Immortal Adventures modules has I think it's an Elmore cover, and it's just a bunch of buff people in loincloths that are like the Immortals hanging out in a lava field like it's a sauna.
Sounds more like Leisure Suit Larry to me.
It's a little thirsty, I think, but
sounds about right.
And it gets weird. Like there's the multiverse, and you wind up in New York and whatever.
Why do they always end up in New York?
You also get to Chicago too, because I guess that's but of all the places that a magic item that you need is going to be, it's going to be New York.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that another time. So you would think, this being called the basic set, right?
Right.
That it would be an introduction to advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
You would think.
But it's not.
Really?
Yeah, no, it's a completely different system. There's no through path, and this is super weird and indicative of how TSR didn't know what the heck they were doing.
For me, I've always struggled with the old style of Dungeons and Dragons and learning how to play the games, learning all the different rules. So I would be totally cheesed off if I was a kid back then. It's I just mastered this. Let's do it. And oh, Johnny, no, none of that shit actually works with the other boxes.
But there was no hard and fast barrier to stop you from playing it either. I played. This was my first D&D system. I got Monster Manual for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons first, and then I got the Expert set because I guess my grandparents thought that I was gifted, and then I got the Basic set. So, how things are when you're a kid, you just play what you have.
Exactly.
And when I eventually got into Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, it was all a big mush to me. There was no real difference. But TSR didn't understand that from a production side of things. So there are all these design walls that when you step back as an adult, you're like, what the heck was I doing as a kid?
Yeah, a lot of extra work.
Well, I mean, that's always the case. So yeah, basic box leads to expert box. It doesn't lead to advanced.
Sure, go with it. It feels right.
The other book in the box is the Dungeon Master's book, which is, your basic introduction to how to run a game. The thing about this book is the inside cover. That's the thing for me. When I was in 4th grade, I had this. And instead of doing my schoolwork, I had a photocopy of the inside cover and a pad of graph paper and some colored pencils. And what the inside cover is a key. It has all of the little things that you could put in your dungeon, like stalagmites and fireplaces.
Oh, that's the best.
And sinkholes and how to draw them. So I just spent that 4th grade year drawing Dungeons and Dragons dungeons.
Oh, so that's how you got your junior cartographer merit badge.
And I don't think that there's actually a cartography thing in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think there's anything that matches this key in terms of the broadness of everything that you could stick into a dungeon.
That makes so much sense now that as I think back, your maps are always so good and well detailed. I'm like, wow, it's really good at making maps. It all makes sense now.
Yeah, because I've been doing it since I was 8. But so the basic set, I think that was the story of the basic set. There's a million of these things printed. I mean, maybe not actually maybe literally.
Yeah.
And if you went to somebody's house and they had one D&D thing, one D&D product that was for the game formal, not like a toy, there's I would say a 75% chance that it was going to be the basic set kicking around.
Well, because it doesn't sound like many of the other sets until you got to Expert or immortal, like you're starting in the middle.
Yeah. This was obvious. I mean, it says basic. It's a good marketing thing.
Could you imagine though, like, imagine like back in the day, like you got like a cool dad or cool mom, and they're like in the store and like, oh, it's Dungeons and Dragons. Little Billy might like this. And they buy like the advanced set because they like the cover better. And you're just like, I don't know what the hell to do with this. Why are they all in hot tubs?
Well, that was the thing. When I got the expert set, I got that first. And like, I didn't know what I was buying, but the cover is kind of cool because it's a dragon attacking a knight on horseback.
Oh, I think that's the best one.
Yeah, I really like that one. And it comes with Isle of Dread as the module. And that module is so good.
How cool is that?
Right?
Funny that you mentioned Isle of Dread. Goodman Games recently put out their 5th edition version of it. Now, previously they put out Into the Borderlands. Now they've got an updated version. It is a thick book, and it is the Isle of Dread, and it is the original version, cleaned up looking, of course. I mean, they do beautiful work with their books, and an edition that is scaled for 5th edition. And I am so excited to check that out. So if you are interested in checking out the Isle of Dread and you're currently playing 5th edition, check out the Goodman Games copy of it. It's good.
And that also brings up like an interesting thing is that the basic set is a continuation of that original white box. They are different systems, but sort of philosophically, what do you call that? When it's a spiritual successor. So Goodman Games is releasing these classic modules. They're not even for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. They're basic D&D modules.
Right.
I think it's interesting that sort of how that works in people's minds where, like Keep on the Borderland, you think of that as a classic AD&D adventure, but it's not. It's a Dungeons and Dragons adventure. It's completely different.
Right.
Like you can't play that with the same system. Or Isle of Dread.
It's so
different.
confusing.
It's so confusing.
But it's so good.
It is so good. Like all of this stuff is great, but like it sort of boggles my mind. And you have to understand, like at this point, 83, they weren't even a decade old. D&D only existed for 9 years. So they didn't know what the heck they were doing because no one else was doing it. They were figuring this stuff all out on the fly.
God, I love it.
Yeah. So all of this stuff is confusing because like literally the industry didn't exist and they were building it around them as they were going.
I think that's impressive. As much as people bag on TSR for a multitude of different reasons.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about just jumping out of a plane and figuring it out on the way down.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, we did get a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, because like weird stuff is always better than like the really calculated stuff. You look at how advertising has just functioned over the course of the last 150 years. And like now advertising is so good that you don't even pay attention to it. But back in the 50s, it was weird.
It was everything.
And you saw super strange people just throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. And D&D has sort of worked the same way. And people immediately started to build on this. Chaosium almost immediately had their basic role-playing game. And all of a sudden, like this whole industry is trying to figure out how to like cater to people who don't have the war game background. As a community, in 40 years later, we've gotten much better at this. And that's good. But it's also cool to look back at when it was not good and hard and weird and off-putting.
Hey man, it's the Old West. Anything went.
Yeah, and that forbidden quality had like an allure to it, right?
It's still amazing to me that back in the 80s, when moms were worried about things like you're listening to the Ozzy Osbourne record, you're listening to Judas Priest, you're listening to that heavy metal devil music, people were equally, if not more, worried about a tabletop role-playing game.
Yeah.
God, so cool.
Yeah, it's so great. But at the same time, like the thing that really fascinates me about that is that people were worried that D&D was like the devil's game, but it was also getting the biggest sales that they ever had.
The best thing that a parent could have ever done for it was say that my kid is never going to play this. You fetishize it.
Yeah.
You kind of make it, well, mom says I can't do it. There must be something in there that's awesome. I have to know. And that's how they built their empire.
It took forever for me to get my mom on board. And it would really only happen accidentally. Like other people bought stuff for me that she didn't really approve of. But once I had it, like the floodgates opened.
Oh, the grade school black market.
And my cousins were Catholic. They heard the reputation. It's like, oh, that's the devil's. What are
you know,
talking about? It's got dragons in it. Like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the edition you were able to have access to didn't even have demons in it anymore, because 80s reasons.
Yeah, and it comes with a crayon. Like how for your dice. But like how horrible could a box with a crayon in it be, really?
Oh my God. And it was like the shitty like pause crayon. Like you could either decorate your egg or fill in the numbers on your dice.
Totally. Oh.
You know, it's funny because the day this episode releases is my actual 40th birthday.
Oh, well, there you go.
And I think it's funny that I never got to play D&D as a kid because I was already getting picked on and beaten up for liking heavy metal music. And then like I didn't
So
get
you had enough problems.
I had
It's
enough
like I don't need to
problems.
bolt anything on
Yeah.
here. All right.
Yeah. Then I was getting, you know, I didn't get to play it as like a late teen, early 20s because it was either that or getting laid.
Mm.
My girlfriend flat out told me, if you play that nerd game, we're done. I made some choices.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, when I was 25, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons with you and the guys. And I think that I have made up for my entire young life not having played Dungeons and Dragons to now when I'm actually going to be 40 years old. I'm playing more D&D, more role-playing games, more board games than ever. I don't think I've ever been happier. That said, I read through the red box, and I'm also glad that I didn't try to get into it when I was a kid because I might not have fallen in love with it.
Well, we played it recently. Our friend Sean ran it. It was just such a frustrating experience.
Yeah.
You know, these books don't have indexes.
No.
So you don't know where anything is. And that's exacerbated by the fact that key rules are spread out across box sets, which is a cool idea for selling stuff. But when you're actually trying to play the game, to have all these different books with no indexes,
Oh, yeah.
a real pain in the ass.
And by this point, we're playing it. I mean, I was like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
And we were frustrated then.
Yeah. We're old men.
I couldn't imagine how frustrated I would have been trying to play this when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Forget about it. I was trying to learn how to play guitar. It was one or the other. Equally frustrating.
They did eventually, a little bit after this, they relaunched the basic line in the rules cyclopedia, which is everything in the first 4 boxes in one hardcover book.
Well, isn't that nice?
With an index.
Whew. That's the best part. Folks, if you are going to release a game, if you're going to release a book of any kind, please do the right thing. Put in an index.
It's the first thing that gets cut for budgetary concerns.
I know, and it's the worst.
Like, if I'm going to play something, it's a reference book. It needs an index.
Oh, Lord. So, Stu, do you have any final thoughts on the red box?
Always put an index in things. I don't know if that's a final thought or an axiom or a call to action.
I feel like it's our the more you know. Beep, beep, boo, boo.
Yeah, no, I got nothing else.
All right. So that is our talk on the red box. We are going to dive deeper into the other volumes of the BECMI at a later date, and we're going to take our time with it because they're rather frustrating.
Yeah.
So we're going to move along.
I can't find them on my shelf because they're not indexed. It's
So
a really specific line of humor that like only I appreciate, but I don't care. It's my podcast.
I think anyone who had gotten hot and bothered by the last episode where we talked about the box fitting on the shelf, they're going to enjoy that too.
Fair. Yeah.
So, Stu, why don't you tell us about the great mail day that you had?
Oh, geez. So I just recently was introduced to Exalted Funeral, which is a distro, I guess. I don't know how this really works in the indie RPG scene. He's not publishing them. Well, maybe he is for a couple of them. Anyway, he's got a lot of role-playing games, and they're all cool. So I bought as many as I could afford, which is what I do. He runs the gamut, too. It's not just role-playing games. He also stocks, weird occult books.
That's cool. With a name like Exalted Funeral, you're
It's
either
so
like
good.
a King Diamond album. That would be a great name for a band, buddy. You should trademark that. Or a place where I would expect them to sell occult books.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I think that role-playing games and occult books is like chocolate and peanut butter, but I am super into the combo.
I know. It just sounds delicious. Go on.
So I got a plethora of books.
Yeah, you did. Folks, for those listening at home, there is a stack of books on Stu's knee right now.
One of the companies that he distros is Armchair Planet. They have sort of a whimsical 5e D&D campaign setting that they're
Nice.
fleshing out. And they're super cool. One has like the Sweet and Deadly Candy Isle mini adventure. And like you fight candy people in search of like,
Oh, I'm sold.
yeah, they're ridiculous. And they have, the other one is Mortzingersturm's The Mad Manticore of the Prismatic Peak. And it's done in a real 50s style.
It looks like a real Rankin Bass style, like Mad Monster Party.
Totally Mad Monster Party. That is so on.
Oh, it's so good.
And they're lighthearted and cool. It's something different. I feel like the thing about 5e, the Wizards of the Coast stuff is that it feels very homogenous and regimented. And I like seeing folks in the space starting to do stuff that doesn't look like that has a different sense of humor and such.
Well, speaking of humor, why don't you tell the folks listening at home about the book with the unicorn on it?
So it's not really a role-playing source book. It's just sort of a fun flavor book, all fluff. It's called The Unicorn Cookbook: Fantastic Beasts and How to Eat Them.
It's a cookbook.
If you know anything about me, I mean, it looks sort of, it's like a silly looking book.
It looks like a coloring book.
Yeah. It's got like a marker art style to it. And like, not really my speed, but like in its core, this idea of like eating cute monsters is sort of, I think, very on brand for me.
Yeah, not so much for me. You just live your truth.
You just want to hug the cute monsters.
I just want to hug all the
I'm
cute
just
monsters.
like, let's kill them and see what they have on the inside.
And that's why he played Hannibal Lecter in Mixtape Massacre, folks.
Exactly. There's some cool stuff that's like psychedelic, this Misty Isles of the Eld. We'll talk more about one of the creators of that in a second. Witchburner has like a heavy metal vibe. I don't want to actually talk too much about Witchburner because I want to run it for you guys because it has a hell of a twist. And I will run this 5e.
Let's do it.
And
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because 5e is my jam. It's my boo.
Witchburner, I think it's sold out right now. So like if you're listening to this and like think, whoa, Witchburner is such a cool name for like a scenario.
Also a great name for a band.
Yeah, totally. That's sort of the intersection. Like there's a whole heavy metal vibe here.
Why don't you tell the listeners about that little brown book, which is something that when I first saw it, I completely popped for. It is something that looks like a pamphlet. However, it is a book about basilisks, specifically
The 9 Defenses Against the Basilisk. Subtitled Black and White Magic for Surviving Extreme Anxiety. So like this is an actual occult book, like where they're using like occult principles, magical principles to solve your problems. And I knew that buying it. I didn't think that it was a D&D book, but I really like the graphic design. I'll make sure to throw pictures of this stuff up on the
please do.
In the show notes. I couldn't resist. It's such a cool little book. And I haven't read it yet, but I mean maybe there's something to help you with anxiety in here.
Who knows? So Stu has a plethora of books that he's going to be going through, some of which we are going to go into detail on in later episodes, some of which we are going to actually get to play, and I am so excited about it.
I have 2 things I want to add real quick.
Go for it.
Exalted Funeral with Luca Rehic. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry. He's the artist and writer of Witchburner. They're doing a Kickstarter for a large RPG hardcover called Ultraviolet Grasslands, which is sort of like a psychedelic journey RPG across like sort of a psychedelic wasteland, which is super cool. It looks super cool. Luca's art is fantastic and weird. He sort of works in a style that reminds me of Mobius. So
love it.
Yeah. So I will have a link for that in the show notes. And completely unrelated to Exalted Funeral is the Swordsfall RPG, which also has a Kickstarter going right now for the core campaign setting book. It's a sci-fi fantasy game set in an African world.
Ooh.
And it looks super cool. And we're going to have the creator of that on in a future episode. We're going to interview him. We couldn't do it ahead of the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But it's a super cool game. It's super exciting. And I'll have links to that stuff too.
Fantastic. We're also going to put the link to the Mixtape Massacre Escape from Tall Oaks Kickstarter in the notes as well. If you want to see what's in the box for the original Mixtape Massacre, I did an unboxing video for it. You could see it at our Patreon at the $1 level. So definitely check that out. The link will be in the notes as well for that.
Back us, back them, back everybody. Support your favorite creators, man.
Support the businesses you believe in, folks.
Keep people making cool stuff.
Exactly. And then we'll have more things to talk about.
Exactly.
Folks, this was another awesome episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can the people find you?
They can find us daily now at Vintage RPG on Instagram because I'm reprinting stuff on the weekends. So it's
fantastic.
Like, it's great. It's fun. Oh, and Unwinnable. That old thing.
He does that too, folks.
That's my real job.
You could find me on Twitter at Hambreaker. I'm constantly tweeting about D&D, cute animals, and professional wrestling. You could find me on Instagram, where I'm always posting about my adventures and the podcasts I produced, at John Hambone McGuire. And for my other podcast, My Thai Happy Hour, you could check that out where podcasts are found.
You would think, I'm on 2 podcasts and I can't do a bio like that. Like you would think I would be there.
I've been doing podcasts for so long now. I am very well practiced, and I'm in sales, so it's one
true.
Constant pitch.
It's just someday I will do it as good as you, and we'll probably stop doing the podcast after that.
Open up a sales firm. Folks, when you are listening to this, I will be 40 years old, and I have never been happier.
Happy birthday!
Thank you, Stu. Never been happier playing games, hanging out, doing the things I love to do. I encourage all of you to take the time to do the same. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dego West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.